Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another show. The released American Israeli Aidan Alexander refused to meet with Benjamin Netanyahu. He made multiple statements after his release, thanking Donald Trump and also talking about his situation. But what raised eyebrows and what made Benjamin Netanyahu go totally insane is the fact that he was invited to meet the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he simply said no. So we had multiple reports in Arab and Israeli media about him refusing to meet Benjamin Netanyahu and how that is making Benjamin Netanyahu look in a very, very negative way. He's embarrassed in Israel. He's humiliated. The American administration is forcing him to go and negotiate. He's trying to explain the situation that he's in to his coalition government ministers. But despite all of that, he can't hide the facts that are happening on the ground. So why did this freed Israeli American refuse to meet Benjamin Netanyahu? Well, for the very obvious reason. Benjamin Netanyahu wasn't the one who released him. The one who released him was Donald Trump following direct talks with Hamas. Israel wasn't included in these talks. There was no involvement of any Israeli representative in the release of Aidan Alexander. It was Adam Bowler and the relevant delegation from the United States that spoke with and still speak to the Hamas members in Qatar, in Doha. Now, this is just the beginning of the report. There's something even bigger than that. And that is the fact that this man is very likely to go and meet with the president, Donald Trump, in Doha, and meet with the head of Qatar too, the Emir of Qatar. There were reports initially that he was about to go within about 24 hours. There was slight delay. Some people said, oh, look, his emotional situation, his physical situation, all of the details. However, there is a confirmed delegation going to Doha, led by senior figures from the United States administration, and they're going to meet with Donald Trump and with Al Thani. He is very likely to be with them in this delegation. And this is another blow coming for Benjamin Netanyahu. They're going to go with Steve Witkoff. Imagine that. You're in a country, your prime minister couldn't care less about people who he supposedly went to war for to rescue and save. And then another country comes and tries to deal with that other party that captured these people, took them as prisoners, and then they start actually achieving results. So Benjamin Netanyahu is looking very weak. People need to understand that. Benjamin Netanyahu looks like he doesn't have authority, he doesn't have power, and he doesn't have skills, and he isn't making the right decisions, because things on the ground are being implemented that are crucial to the Israeli society and the Israeli people without his involvement. As a matter of fact, when he's put on the side. So what is that message? That message is put Netanyahu on the side, get Netanyahu out of the picture, we get results. But there's a very big problem. Benjamin Netanyahu is still there. Benjamin Netanyahu is still there. And Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to reassure what's happening with the cabinet. Reassure his cabinet, tell them that, look, it's not a big deal. We're going to continue with the war. It isn't going to end. So we had this report here. As the Israeli negotiators head to Doha, PM assures coalition partners Israel is not going to end the war. And what is Netanyahu saying here? His coalition now is basically him. His coalition is either yes men or people who he is bound to be with to protect his coalition. Smotrich and Ben Gvir. He's telling them, we might actually accept a temporary ceasefire, but we're not going to end the war. So there's something happening. Netanyahu wasn't talking about a ceasefire. He's saying now, though, we might go into a temporary ceasefire, but that wouldn't end the war. And he's threatening, we're going to go back with full force. What full force? You are missing tens, if not hundreds of thousands of troops. You have people refusing with the Air Force. The whole country is against you, and your child murdering terrorists in Gaza are being smashed to bits by the Palestinian resistance everywhere. Just in the past week, 3 ambushes taking dozens of Israeli terrorists in Gaza, including commanders. What are you going to escalate with? The people inside of the Gaza Strip, they've already faced all of the destruction on earth. Destruction, starvation, everything. And they're not going to give up to hand Benjamin Netanyahu a victory. Now, why is Benjamin Netanyahu doing that? Benjamin Netanyahu is doing that to portray an image of authority, to reassure his genocidal, ethnic cleansing supporting coalition, Smotrich, Ben Gvir, and their followers, his cult, of course, because there are many in Israel who support the vision of Benjamin Netanyahu. As a matter of fact, Benjamin Netanyahu represents Israel in its essence, a genocidal mass state of terror that conducts ethnic cleansing. And now, thankfully, we're just seeing the ultimate representation of that without anyone trying to sugarcoat anything or whitewash or hide anything. But he's telling that so that his members of the coalition can say, okay, no problem. Fine, you can go ahead and you can have a temporary ceasefire so long as you're going to go back and destroy Hamas. This is what they're telling him. And they're threatening again with another campaign inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, what is Benjamin Netanyahu going to do? That's the big question with the proposals that are coming. They are trying to portray the proposals that are coming from Steve Witkoff and the United States administration as something bad. You know, their mouthpieces in the West are talking negatively. They're upset about the fact that people in the administration of Trump are doing things that are not 100% in line with Netanyahu. They didn't suddenly, by the way, speak negatively about Zionism or anything. They didn't just say, oh no, Israel as a whole country is a problem. We'll get to that. But there's talk about the Israeli government. There's talk about the Israeli government is not our ally. Talk about they're harming our relations. Lots of negative talk coming from Western leaders and even Western mainstream media. And that could be a move that comes before severe statements come against Israel as a state, which is the genuine, true, real case, which is Israel as a Zionist entity committing ethnic cleansing since its inception. But they're talking about this proposal and these attempts coming from Steve Witkoff as malicious exercises in Israel, trying to downplay these efforts and portray them in a way that is negative for the state of Israel. So we had one of these articles here in Ma'arif saying that Witkoff's plan has failed. Israel fears this is the malicious exercise being plotted behind the scenes. And in this article, the woman is saying that, well, there have been attempts previously. Israel clearly still refuses to have an ending of the war unless Hamas disarms and is completely out of the picture. By the way, without confirming that they will end the war. Israel did not at any point confirm it will end the war, even if the Palestinian resistance disarms. And they will not, because look at what they're doing in the West Bank. There is no Palestinian resistance at the scale of Gaza. There's a Palestinian authority in the West Bank. But the maliciousness that she's saying here, and this is one of the main Israeli newspapers, the maliciousness is that Steve Witkoff and the United States administration are not going to go to previous sort of agreements that happen between Israel and the United States and the mediators. Israel is interested in returning to the previous outline, but the Trump administration is already looking ahead. So Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff are not telling Benjamin Netanyahu, yeah, sure, you agreed on that, we'll go back to it. Clearly, we are seeing a phase of a worse deal for Israel, like Steve Witkoff told the families of the Israeli prisoners of war several days back. When we spoke about it at the time, he said Israel will have to pay a heavier price. That deal was on the table at the time. Israel refused it. Israel broke the ceasefire. Israel went out of the actual ceasefire that it accepted, similar to so many agreements that they had previously. But now the United States administration are telling them, okay, you're going to have to pay a price. So they're trying to show, some people in Israel, they're trying to show that the United States administration has certain elements and people that don't want what's best for the state of Israel. You even had people like Ben Shapiro having a hissy fit, telling Steve Witkoff, oh no, he's not a good negotiator, he's not doing his job properly, showing anxiety and paranoia over the fact that the Trump administration is taking certain steps that are not totally in the favor of Benjamin Netanyahu. Is Netanyahu going to succeed with these attempts? Of course, he's not going to succeed, because the people are seeing that the Israeli prisoners of war are being released. Therefore, this is what's working. What's working is getting Netanyahu out of the picture. And from a broader perspective, the people will think, okay, if the Americans manage to reach a deal with Hamas, well, how about the Americans come and manage the country? How about Netanyahu completely getting out of the picture? So they're seeing this as he's the only obstacle. Now, of course, they've been saying that for a very long time, but now it's becoming more tangible. It's translated physically. A man is being released as a gesture from Hamas because they spoke with Trump. And imagine we can have more of that, and they're not being released only because they're Israelis and because our prime minister is refusing to continue with the talks and talking about destroying Hamas and all of that garbage, instead of focusing on the lives of those who remained in Gaza and Israel hasn't killed yet. Israel killed the majority of the prisoners of war in Gaza, if not all of them. Those who are dead from the beginning, from the 7th of October. After Israel itself massacred people in the Nova Festival and in Re'im and Nir Oz and all of the kibbutzes. Now you can't convince anyone in Israel that, no, it's not good to go ahead. Therefore, Netanyahu is assuring his coalition. And he's trying to show them that, listen, we might go into a deal, but it's not going to necessarily end the war. However, how is that formula going to work? They're probably talking about this right now in Qatar, because Israel sent everyone from the delegation, excluding Dermer, because he's proven to be a failure. And although he leads the delegation, but the senior figures, representatives of the Israeli Shin Bet and the army, the head of the case of those who are kidnapped in Israel, all of them are in Doha, and some of them went to Cairo to talk. So there could be something cooking there, but Benjamin Netanyahu is reassuring. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is reassuring the people in his cabinet that we will continue the war and we will go in full force. But is that actually reflecting something that Israel can do? Can they actually do it? Israel just went out on a massive campaign, an operation they're calling it. Military police launches deserter operation. Netanyahu threatens to go all the way. The IDF this morning launched an operation to arrest deserters who did not report to their draft orders. In order to enforce this, an unprecedented course of action was decided upon, never seen before. Israel has never seen any operation like this before. They are in panic mode, trying to recruit people to the army, to the genocide army, failing miserably in Gaza, to try and make up numbers for the sake of Benjamin Netanyahu. Is that a capable country? Is that a capable army? That's a desperate army in crisis mode. And their crisis is leading them to carry out an operation, to go and force people and arrest them because they refused draft orders to go into the Israeli army. That's not a country that is able to conduct a war. That is not a country that is going to be victorious. That is a country in crisis. That is a country that is defeated. That is a country that is humiliated and is incapable in front of people with basic types of arms fighting them and resisting them inside of the Gaza Strip. Now, is that going to succeed? No, it's actually not going to succeed. As a matter of fact, in Israel, the Haredi members of the Netanyahu government are warning that with the first arrest, if Netanyahu goes on this operation and arrests are going to be made, the coalition, the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, will collapse within hours. So later on in this article here, a senior source in the Haredi party said, for his part, quote, if the arrest of the yeshiva students goes ahead, there will be no coalition immediately. It won't take days or weeks, and the event will be very quick. The clear instruction of the great men of Israel is that from the first moment reports received about the arrests of the first student until the letters of resignations are sent, it's a matter of hours. In light of the IDF's decision to begin arresting young men who have not reported for draft orders, the Haredim are sending threatening and stressful messages. But for now, it doesn't seem like the Prime Minister's office dialing areas are buying them. The incident is being handled. The government will not fall, even if the IDF does what it has decided to do. A way will be found to overcome this crisis. Sources familiar with the details said. We're talking about a crisis. You sugarcoat it, say whatever you want to say. The people in the Israeli Haredi community, they already warned from before that if Benjamin Netanyahu goes on this campaign to arrest people, that's it. They're going to leave the government. As a matter of fact, top religious figures in Israel said that we will leave the country altogether. And people have been protesting for a very long time in Israel. These images here, we will die as Haredis and not live as seculars, they're saying. We will not serve Zionism. We will die and not go to the Israeli army. These people, from their perspective, they're considering this to be a religious case. You can't play with them. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu, who's threatening about Gaza, going and saying that, oh no, we're not going to end the war. We're going to have a massive operation. All of a sudden, how can you do all of that when you're facing such a massive crisis? Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is in a very big crisis. And what Benjamin Netanyahu did in moments of crisis before, at least in the past 17 months, is escalate, is find something to escalate. In September 2024, around September 2024, when the peak protests against Benjamin Netanyahu started to escalate even further, he decided to begin a war, a full-scale war against Lebanon, and he added another objective that it is relating to Lebanon for the first time. He did that so that he can avoid pressure. The people were in the streets trying to force him to go into a deal, especially after at that time Joe Biden confirmed that Netanyahu agreed to a deal, and it was Israel delaying after he had also multiple senior figures from the war cabinet resigning after Netanyahu himself refused to get a deal for his own interests. Netanyahu escalates, and that's why Benjamin Netanyahu has multiple fronts open: Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and Iran. They're talking about more operations with Yemen, against Yemen. However, will Benjamin Netanyahu go on his own for an attack against Iran? Now, there was a dangerous report in one of the Israeli newspapers saying that the IDF closed the Red Squadron ahead of an attack on Iran. They're calling it drama in the Air Force. The 115th Squadron of the Air Force simulated enemy aircraft to improve the pilot's abilities. So what is this squadron exactly? We'll give you all of the details here. The squadron was closed and the aircraft and crews were transferred to operational squadrons. A force source said, we are making adjustments in light of the changes in combat arenas. Now, this squadron was supposed to train and have simulations over all of the Israeli attacks in the region, in Gaza, in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and also in Iran. Now, closing it, having everyone who participated in this squadron to go to the Israeli Air Force means one major thing is about to happen. Or could it mean something else? Well, the first scenario is Israel is gathering all of its forces, all of the strongest top elite people in the Israeli Air Force, and the equipment and everything that they need to prepare for an all-out attack against Iran that it will take on its own. Not necessarily without the US, as a matter of fact, most likely without the US, because Trump is not interested in a war with Iran. Now, is Netanyahu capable of conducting an attack against Iran? He can. Yes, the Israeli Air Force, they have capabilities to conduct an attack against Iran. It could be catastrophic. It could be devastating for Israel. And Iran could take it down fairly easily, like they've done with True Promise 2. However, at that time, it was fully coordinated with the United States. The United States did not participate directly in the attack with Israel, but they allowed it to use Iraqi airspace that the American Air Force uses. They went and attacked from there against Iran. Shows you the level of cowardice in Israel, because they weren't really even coming close to Iran in fear of being obliterated. Now, the United States is having tensions, visible disagreements with Israel that are coming on top of the surface. They're surfacing now, all of the details. And Steve Witkoff is going to Qatar. They're having certain statements that are showing that there's a big difference between the two countries, especially in their vision for the ceasefire in Gaza and the future. Trump wants to have certain deals, and he wants to close the deal with Iran, business Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar too. Israel, however, is causing him problems now. What is sold to us, or what is sold to the people as the greatest asset of the United States in the region, Israel, is becoming its biggest liability. As a matter of fact, there's an argument that it has been its biggest liability for a very long time. And the United States isn't really supporting Israel apart for neo-colonialist purposes. Now, if Benjamin Netanyahu decides to go on a war with Iran, he can. He has the Air Force to do that. He has capabilities. But he will not necessarily get the support that he wants from the United States. Is Benjamin Netanyahu at a political level? Is he in a political situation where he feels like he has to conduct this move against Iran? That question is very serious, because if the answer to that question is Netanyahu's desperate now, then that's one of his only resorts, because it wouldn't create as much drama as him carrying out more attacks against Lebanon or in Syria or in Yemen. Why? Because in Lebanon, Hezbollah are still adhering to the ceasefire. He tried to poke them multiple times to escalate. They were not responding. Syria, likewise, he pokes them, instigate to attract a response. There is no response from Syria. In Yemen, well, they're thousands of miles away anyway, and their attacks are not dependent on Israeli borders. So there's so much drama he can have. Plus, it takes so much effort from Israel and so much money spent to go for 2,000 kilometers over Yemen, conduct attacks, and go back. Theatrical attacks. Cement and oil and whatever, something that causes fire and releases a lot of smoke and ashes. Typical garbage that Israel does, apart from massacring people and innocent civilians. Now, that is the first option. He can go there, he can escalate, but he might face a lot of trouble. He might face a lot of trouble because from an Iranian perspective, that would be the final straw. That would unleash the wrath against this genocidal, child-murdering entity once and for all from an Iranian perspective. Or they could have a limited operation that will be very, very intense against Israel. Two options of response from Iran. Now, if Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't go on this operation, he needs to have certain sacrifices internally. He needs to have some sort of an agreement, a ceasefire, where he will not confirm that he will end the war, but he's going to do it for the sake of the US and try and protect his coalition at the same time. That's assuming that this report means that Israel wants to attack Iran, definitely. Because there is prospect. Israel has attacked Iran before. Iran has attacked Israel. All of that just happened in the past year. There's another probability here. Well, the other probability is the Israeli Air Force is in absolute crisis mode. They have reduced the airstrikes in Gaza. They're carrying out more missile, or for the first time in history, actually, missile strikes against Gaza. The letter of the Israeli pilots refusing to serve spread like wildfire. More and more people started to sign. People outright calling for rejection. Israel having an operation, a desperate operation against the Haredi community to force them to go into the genocide terror army, because all of them are either killed or lost a limb or having PTSD, tens of thousands. And there are many who don't want to fight. That could be another meaning. Why? Well, because the people in the Air Force serving now and the reservists are causing us a lot of problems. People for the first time talking about ethical reasons, even in a letter that they sent to the air commander in Israel. The air commander now has to approve every operation that Israel conducts in Gaza. And those pilots who conduct the operations, they go on social media afterwards as well to verify. I mean, to check how many children they killed, basically. But, of course, they receive targets. If they target and then they find out that this target wasn't as described, they will raise it with the commander. So it's becoming very problematic. And, of course, they're seeing all of the tensions, all of the neglect, the fact that many of the Israeli prisoners of war are killed in Gaza, and the fact that they could be killing more Israeli prisoners of war inside of the Gaza Strip. That could be the second meaning. However, what's for sure is Benjamin Netanyahu has two options in front of him now. Either go to a deal that will include the release of all of the Israeli prisoners of war, the declaration of ending the war in Gaza, alongside a long-term solution, at least for several years, or remain stubborn. Netanyahu is trying to find the middle way, having a temporary deal, pleasing his government, and trying to please the United States administration too. However, there's a problem with that. He thinks he can get away with it. He has people who are arrogant enough to think that they can dictate everything that they want in his government. The problem is the United States appears to be past that stage. That's why people in Israel who are supportive of Netanyahu are calling this a malicious attempt from Steve Witkoff. Many warmongers are unhappy about Steve Witkoff pushing for this proposal about Trump, and the United States is only looking for an all-out deal now, not any temporary deals. Witkoff told them before, you're going to pay a heavier price. More talks from the administration about ending the war. Trump himself saying all of a sudden that Gaza needs our help, as if you weren't supporting the same man who was butchering their children. However, the main thing is Netanyahu is going to find it difficult. Netanyahu is going to find it difficult. And one of the things that Benjamin Netanyahu used to do to get himself out of circumstances like this is create an even bigger war.